Alright everybody, welcome back to another Xvault gaming video. Xvault here, and today what I want to go over is some disillusionment we need to speak about, and it's been running amok basically all over social media, kind of coming up again, yet again using it for some sort of ammo or fire towards PlayStation, stating that, you know, Sega went under, Sega failed in the console business only because of the PlayStation 2. Only because of PlayStation in general. Well, I'm here to kind of clear that up, and by kinda, I mean really clear that up, and go over some major facts here, and break this down, and make an understanding of it for everybody. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump to it. Alright, so like I was saying, what we're going to do is clear up some major misconception here that PlayStation was the main reason why the Sega Genesis or the Sega business in general stopped making consoles and went strictly third-party for the games. So let's just start kind of hitting this right out the gate. I'm just going to come out and say that no, that is not the case whatsoever. So we're going to go over some root causes here of why Sega unfortunately failed to kind of stay in the console business, really. And there is a lot of different aspects to it. Is it because of competition? Yes, but it wasn't just PlayStation. We also had, you know, Nintendo obviously out there selling everything that they could and did under the sun, as they continue to do. Xbox also jumped into the foray, and they did just fine, you know, with all the competition out there. So it's just basically starting it off. Yes, Sega had issues, and they put themselves in a very significant financial loss for a lot of different reasons, starting with the Sega CD drive, the 32X, all this stuff. That is the main reason. But just quick topics here. You know, so after the success of the Sega Genesis, there was a lot of miscommunication going on within the Sega company itself, really. There's a lot of changes going on. They just didn't communicate that. There's a lot of miscommunication. I'm going to keep these bullet points super simple and super to the point because I don't want to make this a documentary. That's not what this is. I just want to clear up this miscommunication and this misconception of what's going on and what happened essentially. More than likely, you know, in between that, there was, you know, butting heads and stuff like that as well. That's typical, and sometimes cooler heads prevail. Who knows what happened at the end of that at the end of the day. Also, when the Sega Saturn came out, and just keep this in mind, this came out pretty quickly as well, in my opinion, and they didn't support this too long, and there's a lot of reasons why. Well, the Sega Saturn was also too complicated to create the software for. You know, constructing hardware while Sega of America was waiting for the results. They were just waiting for that result to kind of create something different and just pushing something out there. Unfortunately, that final product was a complicated device, and then it had 2 CPUs, 2 graphic chips, and other processors. So basically, in other words, it was very difficult to work with and a huge challenge for developers to create for this machine. Not to mention, on top of that, this machine was also very expensive, and there was not a must-have IP or creation outside of Sonic and maybe Sega Knights, and that didn't sell super well, and there's a couple others, but there was not a lot of software to also push this, you know, to the forefront of that competition. That was a major factor as well. Also, there was just a super amount of missed opportunities by Sega, you know. They tried to find an alternative to Saturn. Eventually, they found one made by Silicon Graphics, but that just, you know, the company had a chipset ideal for the console. It was in better speed, graphics, and audio, but, you know, Sega of Japan did not want to listen, and so again, we have some miscommunication there. There's another option on the table. At the time, Sony was looking for a partner to work with. First, they went with Nintendo, then they were turned down, then Sony went to Sega. The idea was to manufacture the hardware together and then manufacture games for it individually. Each to collect money, then individually made. But Sega of Japan did not like the idea, and alliance was not formed. Eventually, Sony obviously manufactured the console alone, which deemed the PlayStation or PS1. Moving on with the Saturn, Sega decided to cut off Genesis, despite it had some life left to it. They also cut, a 32X cheaper to a 32-bit upgrade for Genesis owners that Sega had recently introduced, only a year after it was released. So, however, Sega Saturn lasted on 3 years, so only 3 years though. And like I said, there wasn't a lot going on for it. So soon after that, we had the amazing, my favorite console of all time. Let's be honest, my favorite console of all time. Too much to anybody else's surprise, and I'm just the biggest fanboy of PlayStation. That's not the case. I just go where the great games are at, and they've just consistently delivered. But my favorite console of all time is the Sega Dreamcast. Now, this, one thing I have to say about Sega is they have always been ahead of times. They always wanted to innovate. They always wanted to bring cool new ideas to their systems and the playability, and I always respected that. Even with the Sega CD, I put so many hours replaying the Power Rangers FMV Sega CD game, and all you did was press buttons. They were timed prompts, and then you'd press them quicker and this and that, but it was fun to kind of feel immersed at that time. That's what the technology allowed for at that time. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the power of the Sega Saturn. I enjoyed a few of the games that were on there, but I knew it was a big miss and way too high priced, and I was not going to stick with that. So, on to the Dreamcast, like I said. So this released in 1999. It was officially launched in America, and it was a massive hit. It had 18 launch titles to pick from that broke the record for the company and gaming industry. Unfortunately, just a year later, PlayStation 2 was released, which did not help. The competition was just too much for the Dreamcast to handle. That being, obviously, PlayStation 2 with their library. They didn't have as great of a launch setup, in my opinion. They didn't. But the main thing was what? You guys know this by now. Most of us know this by now, especially if you're more than a casual gamer. You're going to understand why. Why it was also kind of a media player. It could play your DVD, movies and stuff like that, where DVDs were brand new. DVD players were brand new at the time. They were going anywhere from, $700 to $1,100 at the time. So you're getting a $300 machine that can not only play amazing games, have a great library, super connected. Everybody knew the PlayStation at this point. The hype was there. And then it could also play your DVD movies for the family and kids and whatever else. It was just this all-in-one deal, and it encompassed so much, and it just got it right, So that was a big thing, but not to put away from the Sega Dreamcast of the fact that it was also innovative. It had the VMU, memory card in there. It had a lot of things you could take on the go with that VMU card. I thought it was super cool. Really ahead of its time, in my opinion. It also had a great OS, I thought, too, as far as setting up the internet. It was dial-up. You could play Phantasy Star Online, which I thought was super amazing. I thought it played the best online games possible before we ended up getting to, the internet capabilities of the PS2 and SOCOM 1 and 2, which was amazing as well. But I still felt like the Dreamcast performed better. I felt like the hardware was better. I was getting 60 frames per second on games like Vigilante 8 and so on and so forth. They had some great games. I loved Sonic Adventure, Zombie Revenge. I mean, I could put a whole list of all these amazing games. I was very upset when it did go under. I understood why. I didn't like it, but I understood why. And, unfortunately, you get these companies that they were just their own worst enemy at the time. And like I said, some of the brief highlights that I pointed out, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of poor decision making, not sticking with a certain product long enough, trying to recoup that money, not focusing more on the games at the time, stuff like that. Sega Saturn was the biggest nail in the coffin, in my opinion, with the high price, lack of games, you name it. Those are two. You got to have games for your ecosystem. And when there's no backwards compatibility at the time, which in a way was unheard of at the time, so that's a pass, but there's nothing to help that weak game lineup. And what sells consoles, especially at that time, or even now, or to an ecosystem, is what? The games. And the games also have to be good. You can't put out shovelware, you can't do this, that, and the other. It needs to be there. So, that being said, that's what happened. It wasn't only because of the PlayStation that, Sega did go out. There was also Nintendo. And again, like I said, Xbox started coming to the fray and started doing their thing as well. So yeah, there's a lot of different competitors as time goes on. And if somebody was going to jump into the console side of things, that was the time to do it. Microsoft did it, had to have a couple games. They did do that, put their mark in there, and then you could only hopefully go up or be in the fray as well there. Anything afterwards, like we're seeing with, Amazon Luna, mid-success, Google Stadia. I know it's only a streamable service that was available, and so on and so forth. To my knowledge, off the top of my head, there was no ability to download it. It was all streaming only. So just a lot of missed opportunity there as well. So it's very hard to have a newcomer kind of come in and make a presence known and get people to jump into that ecosystem. But it's unfortunate. I really enjoyed the Dreamcast, but I just wanted to kind of set that record straight for everybody out there that no, it was not the case that PlayStation was the only reason why Sega did go under. They're not the bad guys that did that. Competition is competition. Everybody else survived and did what they needed to do to survive and make it within that business structure. So, it's unfortunate, but like I said, too much product coming out, too many different add-ons and such like that with the Sega, and Sega Saturn did it. Sega Saturn did it. Even as young as I was back then, I knew that was going to happen. I knew that something was way off with Sega. I was like, what are you doing? This isn't going to be good. They tried to recoup that with the Dreamcast, and it just didn't happen. There wasn't enough time. There wasn't enough financials to help cover that. And at that point, other competition was kind of catching fire, and it's hard to get back from that, unfortunately. But that is competition. But Sega really put themselves in that position to be forced out, so to speak, and they had plenty of opportunity to correct that as they went on. So just as similar as how the PlayStation 3 was very difficult to develop for, and its cell processor and this and that, and then it had the great hack. Like, PlayStation had opportunity to also go under, but they found a way to correct things and figure it out, win the trust back of the consumer, and make a plan going forward, and so on and so forth. So there's opportunity, but it's not one iteration or one issue at fault here for any company if they ever end up going under or having issues and have to adjust or whatever. That's just the nature of the business. So don't let anybody tell you that it's ultimately just one factor in there, especially that PlayStation's the one that did it, and they're these awful people and bad guys that forced Sega out. That's not the case. Love Sega games. I had every console from Sega. I grew up with them alongside my Nintendo and my PlayStation as well, and then eventually the Xbox and so on and so forth. But that's that. Just wanted to sum that up, but I appreciate it. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. We are currently at 537 subscribers out of the 1,000 goal. I appreciate all your support. Every like, comment helps the algorithm. I do want to hear what you have to say down below, so thank you so much for that if you do decide to do that. If you haven't yet, definitely consider subscribing to the channel, helping a small content creator like myself out. So thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and we will see you next time on the next Xvault gaming video. And until then, take care.